All right, peace and blessings, everyone. Hope you're well. You're now locked in with the baddest chaplain on the globe, Chris B. Want to thank you first for supporting by subscribing on YouTube, baddestchaplain.substack.com, Spotify, Apple, any and everywhere you can get podcasts. But here today, we're going to talk about WNBA finals, WNBA expansion, and my guest today is pastor, writer, mender, schemer, and dreamer for Boston Women's Sports, Laura Everett. Laura, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Hi, Chris. It's real nice to be with you.
Oh, 100%. Good to see you too. Good to be with you too, for sure. You know, I really believe that we are in the midst of women's basketball crafting a golden age.
Yeah.
And you know, you think about the WNBA playoffs, been incredible, record attendance and ratings. Going back to even March Madness, that was tremendously exciting. Like casual basketball fans are talking about Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark. So this isn't a flash in the pan moment. It's been building for a while. But I want to know, Laura, what's your excitement for women's basketball right now?
I mean, my excitement is about women's basketball, but I think it's also about pro women's sports broadly, right? Like,
right.
There's been a real recognition that there is an audience, and some of that has been about a marketing shift.
Yes.
And a perception that pro athletes who play in women's pro leagues are not just who you go take your daughter to. Like, we've gotten a lot of girl dad energy. And go take it's a cheap ticket, Sunday afternoon, family fun. And part of what was so fun about the Angel and Caitlin was an elevation both of the play and the rivalry.
Right.
And so some people, you heard all of the pearl clutching and the tut-tutting about they are not playing ladylike. And there was a very racialized tone to all of that.
No doubt.
But also, right, like, we're talking about elite athletes,
right?
And an elevation of the game across the board, whether we're talking about the WNBA or we're talking about the World Cup, right?
Right.
All of this is excellent athletics across the board. So for my mind, like, I'm up here in New England. Why the hell are you watching the Patriots lose again?
Get demolished, right?
Or the Giants or the Jets.
Right.
If you're in New York, do whatever they're doing today.
Come on.
Third quarterback sack when you could be watching the Liberty.
Yeah,
right? Like,
for real.
If you are a sports fan, you want to watch quality sports. Where gender fits into that is an entirely different conversation.
Mm-hmm.
These women are ballers.
Yeah.
Do you want to watch good basketball, or do you want to watch men?
That's the real question. Because it hit me like when I was just like watching the regular season, but even like going into the playoffs. I remember especially it was the elimination game, or maybe the game before the elimination with the Mystics and the Liberty.
Yeah.
And where Sis on the Mystics just went off and like had like an amazing game. And I turned to my wife and I said, if you don't appreciate this and you say you're a basketball fan, like your misogyny is just jumping out. You know what I mean? Because like, if you really actually, to your point, Laura, like basketball, this is world-class basketball. But if you just because I've heard, and I'm sure you've heard the tired arguments, there's not enough dunking and all that stuff. Like, when we watch a regular NBA game or college game, the dunking isn't the only thing that matters. And it just feels like a very like ridiculous reduction to just say like, oh, there's not enough dunking in it. It just feels like they're using that to really distract from the misogyny,
Look, in our house, we call it the MENBA.
Okay.
But look, I think for a lot of us, what we are formed with earliest becomes normative, right?
Sure. Makes
and whether
sense.
that's white supremacy culture
Talk
or
about that.
men's sports.
Right.
That becomes our standard of comparison.
Yeah.
But I think sports is not inherently male.
Right.
But because of the way misogyny functions and a bias towards men, the structures of oppression in this country have privileged male athletes for hundreds of years in the U.S.
Yeah.
And so we come in with a presumption about what something should look like.
Right.
But I know so many male coaches who show the WNBA to their emerging and young athletes, because if you want fundamentals, that's where you should be watching.
Right. Absolutely.
But most of all, it's just good fun, right? Like, it's excellent play. And I'm really like, I mean, I think we understand this as pastors and as preachers and teachers. At some point, you know, I stopped trying to justify my existence.
Speak on that.
Right? Like, I know if I carry a Pentecostal vision that the Holy Spirit has come upon all people equally,
right,
and has blessed everyone with talents, then why am I spending so much time trying to justify to some folks who have already like discounted half of the population?
Come on.
That they are not worthy of eyes, time, talent, and investment?
Right.
Like, it's just boring.
Yeah.
You've decided, you've written off so many people already. That's why systemic racism and sexism and homophobia is just so short-sighted, right? We are squandering the gifts of God.
That's a word right there, Laura. That is a word. And really putting God in the box. Like, no, God can only use these people. Like, these are only, like you feel this, like, trying to, like,
man, your imagine is that small?
Right. Trying to tie God's hand behind God's back is wild to me. You know what I mean? Like, what we doing? Right,
like, this is the thing I love so much about pro women's sports leagues is like there is such abundance, right? And I grew up a sports fan, and I mostly watched pro male sports because that's what was around
on TV.
Me. Like, it's what was on TV, and because every one of those teams had a 50-year, 100-year, 125-year head start of investment, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what is happening now, and I think what we see with the Aces and with the Liberty, is two teams that have had massive investment. Call them super teams, call them all-stars, but what you also have is really two franchises that have put a lot in. And I think we're also seeing the dividends on that.
100%. So let me ask you, talking about the Aces and Liberty, who played game one today and started out, it was close for three quarters and a half. It was neck and neck. And then, adjustments were made, and the Aces blew the door off the hinges, to say so to speak. So I think about the ways in which, I'll never forget this. And this, for those listening, it might be like, yeah, sure. But I remember saying on an Instagram comment somewhere during the season, Liberty Aces, this is what it's gonna be. We're about to see like a real Celtics Lakers situation show up. Like, I think this is gonna be that sort of moment. But do you think it's fair or annoying that I'm using this, classic basketball, 80s basketball Celtics Lakers, 60s basketball Celtics Lakers, right? Classic rivalry. But I'm still using a male example to justify how great these teams are. Like, do I need to do better? Like, help me out.
Yeah, look, like, I mean, I watched the 30 for 30. Like, I get it. But when Boston put up, like, we had Marky Mark and T, I think, I was like, oh, God, it hurts my spirit. Like, this is the best we could, like, Boston could do. Really?
On short notice.
Like a 40-year rivalry. Like, we had more time to go for them.
Some folks.
So, like, okay, here's the thing about using male comparisons.
Yeah.
I get it.
Right.
Like, we all love good old rivalries. And watched it today, right? The commentators for the WNBA finals credentialed the game by showing NBA players and Tom Brady.
Right.
So they were using the presence of male athletes to show how important this game was.
Yeah. That's
now,
fair.
On one hand, like, great, glad they're there. On the other, it felt like feminist cookies.
Ooh.
Like, what? Congratulations, you showed up at a women's pro game, and now we're like celebrating you for being a feminist ally. Like, back up. It's a reinstantiation of a male gaze that women are only valuable when men's eyes are upon them.
Right. That's fair.
I'm done with that. Like, I don't need men credentialing women's work, and that's what makes it valuable.
Right.
No, their game is valuable because they are excellent athletes.
Yeah.
Not because men are watching.
No.
But I think for some people, there's still a perception that unless and until men are watching, that is what authorizes credentials and where value comes from.
Yeah.
I think so many oppressed groups, so many minoritized groups, so many people who've been held down under systems and structures of oppression are told that you are not valuable until someone higher above you deems you worthy.
Right. That's fair.
You know, how do we say, like, no, I'm worthy because God made me. I'm worthy because I got game. I'm worthy. Like,
right.
I think that's part of what was so fun about, like, Angel and Caitlin, about Asia, about Stewie, right? Like, you've got a generation of folks who are saying, man, I'm not waiting for you to tell me I'm great.
Yeah.
I know this in my bones. And I think for those of us who are Christian, like, what is a posture of Christian humility that both knows our own worth as beloved children of God,
right,
and can receive, like, appropriate levels of feedback, right? Like,
yeah.
You know, like, it's a tough thing. So, like, okay, back to the original question, the rivalry. Like, I wait for the day when there's a generation of a high school boys team or a mixed, maybe we get to a point where there's a mixed gender team that says, you know, we're playing like an Aces Liberty rivalry.
Right. Which honestly, if we get, let's say this is to extend the metaphor a bit. Let's say, like, for the next 7 years, the Aces and Liberty meet 4 times or something to that effect. It's not out of sight for that sort of conversation to happen.
No.
Right? It's not an impossibility at all. Because you have the star power there, you have the coverage is there, like there's all the ingredients you need for that sort of conversation to happen, in my opinion.
And I think this is true across a number of women's leagues. Is how do you learn from the men's leagues, but not replicate what has become harmful, right? So
that's a good point.
There are questions about free agency, about control over one's life and careers, about I'd say concussion protocols, like bunches of things. Like, I don't want the National Women's Soccer League to be like MLS.
Right.
I don't want some of the worst stuff I see out of the NHTWH, EL. You know, like, there are ways that, like, just replicating what has come before. Talk about Master's Tools, right? Like, we don't want all of that. Just a replication. There's a language that shows up in the women's bike industry called shrink it and pink it.
Ooh.
Right? You're like, we'll just make it a little smaller and a little pinker.
A little pinker. Wow.
Right? And, like, let's not do that. Like, the prophetic vision, I think those of us who are Christian preachers, teachers, trying to follow that way, is like, what is the way we all get free?
Right. For real. You know, you saying that makes me think about this comment that I really didn't know how to deal with it when I first heard it. It was Sabrina Ionescu, who's really, if I had to pick, it's probably my favorite player in the league. I love point guards. Absolutely, I love point guards. I love point guards so much.
But, like, that's the card you picked. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I you know, that's who like, for me, I just, like, you know, I wanted to support the New York team. Okay. And I remember when she was drafted, I was like, okay, this is a generational talent.
Yeah.
All right, finally, you know, Liberty. I remember them being great back in the day with Spoon and Rebecca Lobo and all that stuff. So I was like, okay, finally we got kind of a thing going.
Yeah.
I'm riding with you know, Sabrina as, like, our generational play, right? This is, you know, I played 2K.
Today.
Well, today, yeah, but she was on fire from 3 all season. You know what I mean? So I saw a lot of what was going on. And I like she has a strong edge about her. And that's where, I think about this quote where she said basically that, the Liberty have been playing the best basketball that New York has seen in a long time, right? So, like, obviously, people take that as like an edge to the Knicks and to the Nets. I don't think the Nets should be that offended, but I think the Knicks being like really like New York's basketball team. I'm a diehard Knicks fan, so at first I was like, man, you know what? She's right, and I think at least for this decade, I think the Liberty have been playing the best sports in New York for at least talking about the 2020s at the very least, right? So thinking about the state of women's sports and what it means for a player of Sabrina's caliber to say something like this, what do you think about her being able to prove that? If the Liberty somehow overcome what the Aces are doing and she's holding up a championship trophy, they're in the Canyon of Heroes. What would it mean for women's sports for Sabrina to be proven right?
So first, I'm originally from New Jersey, so I'm still cranky about Brooklyn, right? Like, that's a New Jersey team. Like, all
the history's in New Jersey, to be honest.
Brooklyn taking New Jersey teams, right? Like, half of the New York teams are New Jersey teams, but we're willing to share. So, fine. As long as
Gotham FC literally puts the slash in that there. So
right, like, as long as we can all agree that like Connecticut is trash, I'm fine.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Fine. So I am an omnivorous consumer of women's sports. So I'm gonna pivot to soccer for just a moment.
Oh, good.
Here's my concern about the premise. I'm concerned about the idea that women have to win to be believed. And there's a pattern that I'm worried is repeating.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm seeing it from women's soccer. But let me say this. I don't think Sabrina's wrong. Like,
right.
Show me how the New York teams who have tried to buy their way in, and like, I say this as a Yankees fan in Boston, right?
God bless you.
I say to my churches, like, I do this as one, because my grandmother would not let me back in the house. And two, our Savior says, love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you. Like, I know from a pattern of like trying to buy your way into wins.
Right.
Mr. Steinbrenner, right? Like,
come on.
It's not a virtuous cycle either for this country, the Yankees.
Right.
But look, like, the idea that women have to win in order to justify our existence or to prove that there is a problem happened with the 2019 U.S. women's soccer team. And that idea that, like, if the women won, then they could prove that their equal pay lawsuit, that they were being discriminated against.
Right.
That kind of got happening, but it's also happening now with the Spanish national team.
Yeah, come on. Right.
And it's sort of working. Like, for those who maybe are not tracking international soccer this much, like, their star player, Jenny Hermosa, was kissed after winning the World Cup by the coach. And on international television, in a non-consensual kiss, was grabbed, and then the federation pretended like it didn't happen, doctored her statement, harassed her family, and this is after 15 players said they wouldn't join the national team after years of the players reporting abuse, not being paid equally, but suddenly when the team won, there was a willingness for their claims of abuse, harassment, and unequal pay to be taken seriously. Now, there are similar claims being made with Nigeria women's national team with the Haitian women's national team and a number of other teams in Jamaica, none of which are getting the kind of visibility and investigative journalism.
My goodness.
So what does it mean that women pro athletes are only taken seriously when they win?
Yeah.
What message does that send to women broadly? Women athletes, people who play on women's pro teams in particular.
Sure.
That you gotta win for us to take you seriously.
Yeah.
So I hear what Sabrina's saying. I love the audacity of that claim.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think she's wrong, but I worry we set up this precedent of like, we only take women seriously when they win.
Yeah. I guess when you started your answer, Laura, I kept searching my mind. I was like, do we take like mediocre male athletes seriously? Like I was wondering about that. You know what I mean? Like was there something that like because it's part my knee jerk reaction was sports culture only cares about winners. Like it's like there's no gray area, right? Like it's kind of like you often hear the whole like sort of like championship or bust. So you could have a 15-year long career like worthy of the Hall of Fame in your respective sport, but if you didn't win, it's like it didn't even happen, right? So I wondered about that aspect of it. But then when you started to speak about like the situation with the Spanish team in particular, and even thinking about the U.S. women's team and the Haitian team, Nigerian team, it made me wonder about the ways in which that sense of the sort of like the sins of general society bleed into sports. So there's often this sense of people like to think that sports is this vacuum, right? Like people always like leave politics out of sports, or like the worst of people saying shut up and dribble, that kind of stuff. Yeah. They want to believe it's a vacuum, but I think so much of like the things we do wrong in general society bleeds into sports anyhow, right?
Of course, right? Like it's a real privilege to be able to say, I'm just going to sit down and watch this. Yeah. And I think what has become true for me as a pro women's sports fan across like multiple different sports is athletes in pro women's sports, Black athletes, queer athletes, Indigenous athletes never have the privilege of just shutting up and play. Because they're always advocating for the bodies they live in.
Of course.
Right? Like, that is, you can't take that off. You can't shed that. And so the idea that I could just sit down and watch and not think about, what does it mean that there are so many more male coaches than there are female coaches when I watch a pro soccer match?
Right.
What does that implicitly say? That there's not a pipeline for pro female coaches, that women are not entrusted to coach themselves.
Come on.
When we look at like the NFL, the idea of ownership language, and that there's so many white male coaches coaching Black players, right? Like all of these dynamics, it's a privilege to just say, I just want to watch and not think about politics.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think, for me, I can't disentangle those. But what I try to do as a fan, as a writer, as someone who is trying to create a space that calls and develops equitable, excellent, and anti-racist sports coverage here in Boston.
Got you.
Is to say those considerations we can hold those considerations and have a joyful experience too.
Right.
That doesn't negate our experience as knowledgeable fans.
No. And if anything, I think sports at its best, it's held those things in tension and used it as a conduit through which we've learned more about one another, right?
Beautiful.
And
100%.
That's sports in my estimation, that's sports at its best, is allowing us to say like, I knew nothing about this social location, and because my favorite player is in that social location, I have a vested interest. So if someone's just talking crazy about that social location, I'm like, no, but so-and-so, I like them. And so they can't be all dehumanized by your estimation because I know I love that person.
Yeah.
That's power. Right. That's the power of sports.
It invites us into other worlds. It invites us into other considerations. It helps us imagine other communities and ways of being. I mean, I get put into conversations with people I would never have interactions with because of fandom, right? Like, and that's a beautiful thing that we get access to because of sports.
Totally it. So tell me what you think means more to you right now. I mean, when you think about switching gears to the WNBA specifically, the Aces being the first back-to-back champs since the Sparks did this in 2002, or the Liberty being an original franchise winning their first time. Now I see the Liberty sweatshirt, and I'm pulling for the Liberty as well, but just thinking as objectively as possible about what's best for the sport. Is it the Aces sort of becoming this dynasty, or the Liberty or an original franchise winning a title?
I mean, if I'm at the WNBA front office, I think you want a Liberty win.
Okay.
Right, because I think you want the Aces coming back angry, hungry, and like for revenge next year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a good story.
Right, like that. I mean, there's the joke going around, right? Like the writers' strike couldn't have been asked for better with this, right?
Right.
Is, I mean, this is building a beautiful, like, superhero-like rivalry.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and we haven't even gotten to, like, the MVP conversation, right? But,
right.
I think, look, like, this is just good basketball. Like, it is compelling to watch. These are really closely matched teams. They have strong fan bases. And again, like, these are franchises that have invested. It's worth remembering, like, the WNBA is young. It is, 26 years old?
I was like 26, yeah, 26.
Yeah, right. And I think there's often a comparison to the NBA, which is 76.
Yeah.
That is like comparing a sapling to an oak tree. Like, there is just nothing to compare the two to. And just thinking about, like, there was a time not that long ago when women did not have their own credit cards, when they needed their husbands to sign off on having a bank account. And so, whether it's Title IX, which allowed or invited, like, a generation that is only 50 years old.
Right.
Like, we're still overcoming hurdles for access to girls into the pipeline of sports. And that is still being built so that you have this. But the pay equity issues that we saw that caused Brittany Griner and so many other players to be playing, this is not sustainable yet. We don't have the kind of infrastructure in place. If I'm still, as a sports fan, like, being a women's sports fan means that I am constantly playing a treasure hunt for what channel my sport is on.
For sure.
And I should not be, like, hunting down A, where the coverage is, and B, where I can read about something in a way that fans of male sports never have to do.
Yeah. I hear that. Something you
running
said
out of sizes of things, right? Like, there's never enough merchandise. I had to create, like, we saw this during the World Cup. Like, there just weren't the jerseys with the names printed of the players. Nike didn't think that there was going to be a market there.
Right.
There continues to be this presumption that there isn't market, there isn't a fan base, and there is an interest. And the data often shows differently, but that lack of investment has the multiplier effect. And, I just long for the day. I long for back pay, but I also long for, like, equal investment.
Right. Well, it's funny because I do think, as much as we have talked about not wanting to compare, like, WNBA to NBA, is that their stories are eerily similar, right? So I think, obviously, to compare the WNBA to the NBA in 2023 is just farcical. But if you were to say, okay, 26 years in will be 1973, I think you still have, Elgin Baylor at that point. It's just a few years after, he led the sort of, like, forming of a union, right? So you have that kind of energy. You're still at that point, people were, flying on, like, chartered flights still. Like, you were not doing the, like, jet setting that's happening in today's NBA. People were, I don't know how, like, think about a giant like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He must have been in yoga all the time, because I don't know how he managed to play basketball being on the flight, like, knees in his, like, cheeks, basically. So if you think about
Yeah.
comparing, the 1973 finals where my beloved Knicks won their last championship, by the way, would have killed for the sort of coverage that the WNBA is getting right now, right? Like to think about, it wasn't until 1981 that NBA wasn't on tape delay, right? So it's like all these different aspects and resources that are afforded to the WNBA now, but in large part it's because, and this is something I think is important for all, marginalized and minoritized groups of people to understand, is that like we build our wins on top of each other's struggles, right? And the successes that we have are built on someone else's struggles and so on and so forth. So a lot of the work that you saw the elders and the pioneers in the NBA, not talking about current players, but going back to the 60s and 70s, their work is also a part of the foundation of the WNBA success and so on and so forth. So it's really just about understanding how we all are pulling each other up, rather than it being something like I cringe sometimes when I hear current NBA players sort of misspeak or maybe just not think all the way through about pay equity when it comes to that, and just really thinking about what it would look like, or instead of them just saying like, I got this, you can get it too, but to really do that work of investing in the league and not just showing up to a game with the orange hoodie on from time to time, but really investing in the league. Like I think Kobe Bryant was trying to do prior to his untimely death.
Yeah. Well, and I think, look, we see beautiful models of that, and there really is a kind of interconnected solidarity that's possible. We saw that actually with the U.S. men's national team on the soccer side, where, like, look, I think they saw that there was mutual benefit. The women were 3 times, 5 times more winning, right? Like, so much. Women were bringing in more money, more revenue. They were winning a lot more, but the men were making more pay. And so an equal pay agreement really served both of them. But, props to the men for like being in solidarity, like shout out to unions and the players associations.
Come on.
I think this is going to be a real point where, like, how do the players associations in multiple sports recognize like that solidarity with one another is going to be a way forward that supports one another? So you think about social movements, like the WNBA has led in so many spaces where the NBA PA has been less
slower foot. Right.
Thank you. They might have been called for a walk.
Oh yeah.
And I think about the NFL and like, look, like Megan Rapinoe just had her last home game, right? Like the way that she followed Cap's lead on kneeling, and like as a white queer woman recognized that the black players on her team like weren't in she had relative safety, but she also got benched for that.
Oh yeah.
Like, so what is, if we are all striving to get free, like, that's going to mean that some of us are going to have to take lead and follow, and that collaborative, intersectional back and forth that says, like, at a time when, like, so many folks are trying to make it feel like revenue, airtime, broadcast rights are finite amount of pie.
Right.
You can't share, that the NBA and the WNBA can't thrive at the same time.
Right.
That's
nonsense.
Just not true. Like,
nonsense.
Why is that? Like, I as a Christian, like, I think this is the work of deep faith, to say, like, no, we serve a God of abundance. Like, we all win.
Yeah.
Which I understand, like, sports sets you up for, like, there can only be winners and losers.
Right.
If we are to approach this work from a place of faith, it's like, no, we all get to win.
Yeah, totally.
There are enough eyeballs for everyone.
Truly. And speaking of that, I think the WNBA kind of feels that way with regard to opening up the league to a new franchise in San Francisco, attached to the Golden State Warriors franchise. This is exciting.
Yeah.
But it's still, I'm an NBA purist. I cannot for the life of me understand why we've never had a WNBA team in the city with one of our most storied franchises. Of course, speaking about the city of Boston. Laura, what is going on? When is Boston going to get a WNBA team?
I mean, it's my next scheme. Not gonna lie, I've already started like talking to folk about. All right, so look, I'm thrilled for another Bay Area team,
right?
And I'm really interested to see how that model, like with Golden State, is going to work. I think,
right?
You know, in multiple sports, I'm intrigued by when male and female or men's and women's franchises are both separate and together, and what that co-branding either helps or hurts.
Right.
Shared facilities, shared branding, right? Like, I think there are pluses and minuses. Mm-hmm. Super intrigued by that. Why has Boston not had a WNBA team? There's like the technical answer, which is Connecticut is 2 hours, and like
fair.
Shout out to the Suns.
Right.
We love an Indigenous-owned team.
No doubt.
For those of us from Boston, like, that's a 2-hour drive, like, not public transit accessible. It's through some parts of Connecticut and Rhode Island that for those of us who are, like, Black and queer and not always, like, the most hospitable spaces. So just went saw the semifinal.
Right.
Like, love that stadium.
Oh, yeah, looked nice.
So we love the Sun. I would say most Bostonians don't think of the Sun as our team.
Sure, right.
But I think that's probably the league's point of view, is market crowd.
Y'all have a team, yeah.
Why does Boston not have a team? Sexism.
Yeah, that's fair.
This is a deeply male-run city until the past few years. And what is so exciting about where Boston is, and like, look, I am not a native Bostonian, but
Got you.
I believe that, after like 22 years in a place, you take the good and the bad, and these are my people.
Got you.
Boston is a majority minority led city, majority minority population. We have now our second woman as mayor, second woman of color serving as mayor, in Mayor Michelle Wu. We have an incredibly diverse city council. But, as I was joking about, like, the Mark Wahlberg on the 30 for 30 about the Celtics-Lakers rivalry, like, you wouldn't know it.
Right. It's not how it presents itself. Yeah.
Right? Like, you think we're all, like, Irish cop movies.
Yeah.
Right, like, I mean, that's everything's The Departed, and like,
took the words right out of my mouth.
Right?
Yeah.
I think Boston does that to itself sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And when people come here, they don't go to Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan.
Come on.
That some of that's the historic racism of our transit and advertising and tourism.
Right.
Some of that's been the inaccessibility of our sport teams. When you think about the history of the Red Sox and the last teams to
integrate.
Right? Like,
right.
Think about the history of the Celtics, which was far better, but like, I still can't buy a Bill Russell jersey.
No.
Like, what's that about? That's just dumb.
And I'm going to say, y'all's greatest player you've ever had.
Like,
period.
It just, like, I can buy 800,000 Larry Bird bobbleheads.
Oh, right.
But, like, I mean, we're taking the Great White Hope, like, way
all the way.
Right, like, so I think, and I grew up in New Jersey, right? Like, I think what happens in places where you have a large pro-sporting scene is that there's a perception that you already have enough. Whether that's New York.
Right.
And, like, to be clear, Boston is like a fifth of the size of New York. Like, you could
tiny.
All of Boston in Brooklyn and there would still be space left over.
So much more space, right.
Boston is a village compared to New York City.
No
it
question.
Is not it is not big. I think there's been a perception that Boston has enough.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true because look, Boston is getting its a reboot of a pro women's hockey team. We're getting a reboot of a soccer team, and Boston has the winningest pro women's football team in the U.S.
Come on,
friend. The Boston Renegades have not lost a game since May 19th, 2018. They have a 40-year-old quarterback. 40-year-old quarterback.
What? What? He 20.
Won 5 championships in a row, and the only one they didn't win was because of COVID. The Renegades are so good, but you wouldn't know it, right? Like, this is the way the sexism in this city works.
Yeah.
And, again, we just had our first generally elected woman mayor, but like, that's 2018. You know how long ago the city was founded? Like,
one of the first ones. Right. One of the first ones we had in this country.
It's not a great history.
No. That's one of those first that you kind of like don't even want to mention too tough. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Oh, goodness.
But, like, I think for me, it's a lack of imagination and it's a lack of investment.
That's fair.
I think it's coming.
Yeah.
I think there is huge possibility. And look, like, Boston has some incredible athletes that come from here. We've been running this Boston Women's Pro Sports website to report on what we think is a real dearth in coverage. But I know from our numbers, like, we shared an infographic about a player, Cheyenne Matthews, who's originally from Lynn, Massachusetts, plays for the Chicago Red Stars, one of the national women's soccer teams, and who also plays for the Jamaican national team.
Okay.
We shared that, like, little tidbit about her when she was put on in one of the World Cup matches. That was our most shared Instagram post, like, through the roof.
Come on.
We know that there are, like, diverse and active and excited communities here that, like, want to cheer on hometown heroes. Those happen to be women athletes.
Right.
But so often, like, the majority white media that orients towards male athletes only is run by majority white men. And so they're missing that there is a huge Brazilian population, a huge Haitian population, lots of folks who are really a huge Nigerian population here that are like really interested in other players. And I don't think people have caught on to that yet.
Yeah. I love how you say it, though, a lack of imagination, just like the possibilities just escaping folks entirely. I like the way you phrase that for sure. Absolutely. So I want to ask you this question. This is a question I ask all of my guests because I love to see the beautiful array of responses. I want you to imagine that you're hosting a dinner. You can only invite 4 guests, dead or living, fictional or real people. Laura, who are you bringing to dinner?
So I bring my wife.
Okay.
Important, right? Like, because both I want to, like, debrief on this afterwards. Be like, did you hear that? What did you? Tell me about what you heard. Right?
Yeah, solid answer.
Jesus.
Okay.
My wife and Jesus. So that's 2. There's a cyclist from Boston.
Okay.
Turn of the century. Her name was Kitty Knox. She was a Black woman and a seamstress, newly freed. And she wore men's clothing in order to compete.
Wow.
Some of the things I love the most. She was a Bostonian, right?
Yeah.
I would love to know more of Kitty's story.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so I take very seriously as someone who has come to this city, treads these roads, inherits this story, as a cyclist, as a queer woman, as a textile artist, that these are the paths I tread. Kitty is someone who died very young. She's buried in Mount Auburn Cemetery.
Okay.
She traversed so many spaces, but she didn't get to live as fully as she wanted, but man, she found some incredibly subversive ways to move in between spaces.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to hear more from her.
No doubt.
So I've got those three, and so I have some curious ancestral heritage.
Okay.
One of my ancestors is a man named Edward Everett.
Mm-hmm.
He, I don't always tell this story because it's both very strange and, some of the things about ancestors is like how much to claim of their story that impinges on your own.
Yeah.
Edward was a senator and a clergyman. He was the guy who spoke before Lincoln at Gettysburg.
Okay.
The one who went on forever.
Right, like long opening act.
And Lincoln just like, it's like the 6-minute mic drop. My guy was the one who went on.
Yeah.
So he was something of an abolitionist, but like maybe not like the most forward-thinking one. But
okay.
I want to know more of him.
Yeah.
And what it meant to be doing that work at that time.
Mm-hmm.
To know more of the places he both struggled with, and I just have a lot of questions.
Get you.
Yeah. Right. Like we share a name, but
right.
I'm sure he would be deeply confused by me. I feel deeply confused by him.
He'd need some time, right?
Yeah, that'd be an interesting dinner party.
It sounds like a good group. Group.
Sure for that.
Listen, and if it ever gets a little kind of, Jesus could bring us all right back into it, like just. So. That's the hope.
Yeah, that'd be a good crew.
That's the hope. But I like the idea of bringing your spouse just so you can like have this wonderful moment, and then like on the way home be like, all right, we gotta process all of that. What was that? That's a veteran move. I like that.
Yeah.
I was thinking.
You need someone to bear witness to your best stuff.
100%. That's well said. That's really well said.
Yeah.
So speaking of bearing witness, how can we bear witness to the good work you're doing with Boston Women's Sports? Where should we go?
Yeah, so that's where the website is. We're on Boston Women's Sports, BostonWomenSports.com, and that's the Twitter and Instagram handle as well. Trying to think bigger and broader and hold that abundant vision. We all deserve excellent and equitable and anti-racist coverage, right? Like, I think that, I want that for Boston. I want that everywhere. And I invite correction on that for myself as well. I think I've been really inspired by, particularly, I came at this from the soccer side of things, and it was the podcasts of some folks who showed me what it might be like to imagine watching a sport centering it on Black women.
Right.
So started listening to Shea Butter FC and Diaspora United.
Yeah.
Right. And it was just like a really different way to approach the sport. And I learned so much. It was like, hey, because I think for white folks, there can be this sense of like anti-racist work being like the thing you need to do to be like a good white person.
Right.
You're like, you kind of go into it being like, I am being dutiful and very reverential.
Paying penance.
And it's a box you check. You're like, but I've done my diversity training.
Right. I checked it off. Right.
You're like, and so, my wife and I, a number of years ago, we were like, we just can't countenance like following the NFL. Like, I grew up a Giants fan. Like, we're like, we just can't do this. Like, as Christians, as feminists, like, they do not deserve my eyes or my attention or my money.
Got you.
We're like, all right, we're going all in. Like, I became a hard Celtics fan. I'm a woman in Boston. I have to talk sports somehow.
For real, right? For real.
It is a social currency.
Yes.
Like, I'm a clergy woman in Boston.
Yeah.
If I cannot talk about how bereft I am about the fact that we just traded Marcus, like,
Man.
Choices were made.
Choices were made. As a Knicks fan, I am glad y'all did that, by the way.
Well, good luck with that for you. We all have our crosses to bear, right?
Listen, this is how I strengthen my prayer life, is what I'm trying to tell you, Laura.
You know, and we were like, look, we're really going to dig in and learn more about soccer. This was probably like, I mean, it was after the 2019 World Cup. We were like, all right, we're going to be like Gotham fans. And it was right around the time that both those podcasts were starting. And we're like, oh man, this is like such a different way to orient towards a sport. It was like, what if we just like decide we're going to be fans of like all of the Black women players and like prioritize coverage of them?
Yeah.
It turns out it's super fun.
Right.
And you notice all of the ways that like terrible racist practices in mainstream media have like minimized how much I haven't been noticing.
Come on, right. The invisibility, right.
Right? Like, so let's reorient. Like, I can be intentional and it can be fun.
Yeah. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. I love that. And just thank you so much. Just, I feel like it's so much. I think there's a lot of folks who are sports fans who really do we all need to do that sort of interrogation of self and think about the ways in which we need to unlearn biases and unlearn things that have just been normalized for us by just consuming not just the sport itself, but the coverage of that sport. So thank you for, really helping. I think you're really helping folks be a part of that sense of process of self-interrogation. So thank you for that, for sure.
Well, thanks.
No doubt, no doubt. And y'all, as always, at Baddest Chaplain on Facebook, IG, TikTok, YouTube. I'm back on Twitter. I tried to walk away, Laura, but NBA is coming back up. NBA Twitter is my favorite space. This man is destroying my favorite social media space. I'm angry about it. Calling it X now, but I'm gonna be back because I need my NBA Twitter. I thought I could walk away. I tried to walk away during the dog days of summer.
I know, but it's still where the conversation is, and right, like where the people are, we got to be.
100%, 100%. But make sure that y'all, with baddestchaplain.substack, the YouTube page, Spotify, Apple, like, subscribe, leave a comment. It's all love. Until next time, be blessed, y'all. Thank you so much. Peace.
Peace.